This chapter is an absolute masterclass in nation-building and strategic maneuvering. We see the Han not just innovating at breakneck speed, carbide lamps, lighthouses, new bijou, but also playing a complex game of diplomacy and economic influence. New Way's negotiations with Yu were a highlight, showcasing the Han's clever and hilariously deceptive tactics to steer the Shin tribe's development. Then there's Yu Fu's return, sparking ambitious shipbuilding plans and tales of giant sea beasts, hinting at vast new frontiers. What truly blew me away was the meticulous strategy for introducing currency to the grasslands. It's not just about minting coins. It's a psychologically astute plan involving infrastructure, market creation, and building trust. Every move feels calculated, from turning Bamboo Island into a paper production hub to subtly creating dependencies. The Han are literally reshaping the world around them, and you can't help but wonder how long until their partners realize the full extent of their ingenious and perhaps a little terrifying grand design. In the 9th month of the first year, the Jianyuan era of the Han tribe, the grasslands enjoyed a rare few days of quiet. Modon, that top dog, had just swept through the southern grasslands, raking in a huge haul of people and livestock, before immediately retreating to his lair to lick his wounds. Under him, only Dalantai remained, leading a small contingent, still, operating furtively, unable to organize even a decent ambush. In Dalantai's own words, they were reconnoitering. This wasn't him making excuses out of cowardice. He truly was reconnoitering. It was just that the more he scouted, the more confused he became, completely unable to figure out what on earth this Han tribe bunch was up to. Those Han soldiers in their iron carapaces were holed up near the city walls day after day, milling about without coming out to fight. It looked like they were training. Indeed, the warriors of the Qianyu Guard and Huban Guard, including the cavalry formed from defected grassland herdsmen, were intensifying their training. You knew full well that the Han tribe's way of fighting on the grasslands had to change. The current Qianyu and Huban Guards were a carbon copy of the Song dynasty's encounters with the Jin and Liao dynasties, a classic mismatch where well-equipped infantry faced mobile cavalry. Their equipment was ridiculously good. In infantry combat, they could practically wipe the floor with the nomadic peoples. Yet, they had a fatal weakness. They lacked mobility, being unable to ride effectively. Against nomadic armies swarming, with cavalry, they'd completely lose the initiative on the battlefield. Whether to fight, when to fight, it was all up to the enemy's mood. They could harass you whenever they pleased, and if they couldn't win, they'd just dust themselves off and slip away. Even if you were clad head to toe in iron, you could only eat their dust. To break this stalemate, there were two paths. One was to learn from the Song dynasty, go all out building fortresses, all the way to the enemy's doorstep, forcing them to engage in siege warfare. The Song dynasty excelled at this strategy, but it was too time-consuming and frighteningly expensive. The current Han tribe couldn't afford such a money-burning game. The other path was to use cavalry to counter cavalry, train a cavalry force even wilder than the nomads, and, adopting the aggressive tactics used by the famed General Huo Kubing against the Xiongnu, proactively seek out the enemy's main force for a head-on confrontation. Comparing the two, you decisively chose the cavalry route. It was quicker to implement and less costly, something the current Han tribe could achieve with some effort. So the strict order you recently gave the Qianyu and Huban Guards was, everyone mount up, become cavalry, damn it. Previously, horses had been scarce. Now Kaiyuan Commandery had become a new cash cow, and livestock and horses from the grasslands were pouring into the Han tribe's territory. Gathering enough horses for 2 guards wasn't a big problem. 4,000 cavalrymen, supplied with 12,000 horses, something unimaginable before. But now it was a piece of cake. Moreover, since absorbing defecting grassland tribes, the Han tribe's horse breeding and training techniques had advanced by leaps and bounds. Previously unheard-of tactics were also coaxed from the mouths of the herdsmen. Recently, the Han tribe had been drilling new tactics daily, All this was thanks to a small tribe that had voluntarily defected a while back. It was a nomadic tribe so small it couldn't be smaller, a few hundred people and a few thousand head of livestock. On the grasslands, they were just small fry. But their tribal chief, Bao Yin, was a capable man. His name didn't sound very imposing. Translated into Han Chinese, it roughly meant good fortune, completely unrelated to anything mighty or domineering. Yet it was this Mr. Good Fortune who, after carefully studying the Han tribe cavalry's equipment and tactics, confidently declared that he had an ingenious plan to double the speed of the Han tribe's heavy cavalry in a short time. When this news reached your ears, you were immediately intrigued. When it came to technology, you dared claim to be the world's best. But when it came to horse breeding and cavalry warfare, you really couldn't boast. After all, you'd barely touched a horse's hair in your life, and your understanding of actual cavalry tactics was only marginally better than those keyboard warriors on military forums. So, with an attitude of humbly seeking instruction, you summoned this Bao Yin. Of course, you had to maintain some airs. You didn't go to him personally, but had him travel by a Han tribe cargo ship to Waishan Commandery to see you. Firstly, it was to learn. Secondly, it was to open his eyes a bit, dampen his eager pride, and prevent him from getting carried away just because he'd thought of a good idea. It was the first time in Bao Yin's life he'd been on a large ship. His eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. In all his years, it was the first time he'd left the familiar grasslands, being pulled towards an unfamiliar place by a huge iron lump floating on water. Along the way, he saw more ships. Without exception, they all belonged to the Han tribe. Some carried people, others cargo. Even sand and black stones had dedicated transport ships. The one he was on, well, it was a horse ship, specially designed for transporting livestock. As the ship passed Luoyang Commandery, he spotted a city several times larger than Kaiyuan City. A crew member proudly explained that this too was Han tribe territory, and the Han tribe had many places like it. Finally, they reached their destination, Waishan Commandery. The sight at the docks made his jaw nearly drop to the deck. Good heavens! Rows upon rows of heavy-duty berths and jetties, capable of docking several giant ships simultaneously. Stretching from the docks into the distance was a black road, paved with coal cinders. Countless horse-drawn carts bustled back and forth. On it, a true scene of ceaseless traffic, more magnificent than any scene he had ever witnessed. Those cargo carts were of a peculiar design, carrying large loads steadily, nothing like the flimsy little flatbed carts the Han tribe sold on the grasslands. Only then did he realize the Han tribe hadn't been selling their best goods externally at all. The towering lighthouse by the docks made his heart pound even more. It was probably the tallest man-made structure he had ever seen. These Han tribe people were truly masters at construction. Though he still didn't understand the tower's purpose, its sheer form was enough to make him gaze up in awe. After this journey, before he had even met the legendary Han tribe leader, Bao Yin's little bit of pride had already been whittled down considerably. The might of the Han tribe surpassed his imagination. No, it was beyond anything he could have imagined. He suddenly felt that his previous understanding of the Han tribe had been ridiculously off the mark. The inner city of Kaiyuan Commandery alone couldn't possibly represent the entire Han tribe. Finally, in the government office of Waishan Commandery, Bao Yin met that legendary man, you. You were very young, looking to be only 16 or 17, younger than his own little brother. Bao Yin couldn't fathom how such an ordinary-looking youth could be controlling such a vast Han tribe from behind the scenes and developing it so rapidly. I hear you have a way to quickly increase cavalry speed, you asked, putting down your brush pen and getting straight to the point. Yes, I can. Bao Yin was taken aback by your direct question. It was completely different from the opening lines he had rehearsed on the way. What is it? You pressed. I want to join the Han tribe and become an officer like Yili. Bao Yin didn't answer directly, instead taking the opportunity to state his terms. Your expression was unreadable, betraying no emotion, your tone flat. My men tell me you've already joined the Han tribe. Therefore, that cannot be your bargaining chip. As for whether you can become an officer, that depends on your abilities. I won't let someone incompetent lead my soldiers to their deaths. You want an official position? Fine. Prove your worth first. Your words stumped Bao Yin again. The whole belly full of bargaining chips he had prepared seemed to have turned into scrap paper before you. Shouldn't the script be the leader agreeing to his terms, and then he presents his brilliant plan? Where had things gone wrong? How had he suddenly become so passive? He couldn't figure it out. But under your gaze, the natural pressure emanating from a superior made it hard for him to breathe. The young man opposite him seemed to possess a magical ability to make people obey automatically, forcing him to follow. Your script. I've seen that the Han tribe's cavalry all wear very thick iron armor, Bao Yin began, steadying himself. Their defense is high, and in a frontal assault, basically no nomadic tribe is their match. However, the iron armor is too heavy. The cavalrymen aren't agile enough on horseback, and the horses tire quickly. For us herdsmen, who are naturally skilled at riding and shooting, they're just big targets. He stole a glance at you, seeing your expression still impassive. He didn't dare to put on airs any longer and had no choice but to reveal his trump card, muttering to himself internally, I hope this young leader is generous. If he doesn't give me any position at all, I'll take my tribesmen and scram. There's no future following a stingy leader. Yes, that's it. Taking a deep breath, Bao Yin continued. Horses, they're timid creatures, easily startled. Once startled, they can easily lose control, even bolt, and the rider can't hold them back. But we can use this to our advantage. When cavalry from two sides charge each other in battle, the horses are bound to be afraid. At best, they'll slow down on their own. At worst, they'll be scared into turning and fleeing. So, my method is to blindfold the horses before the engagement. Unable to see, they won't be afraid of the opposing cavalry formation. Moreover, due to temporary blindness, the horses will be extremely terrified. When horses get scared, they'll bolt like mad, their speed increasing by several tenths compared to their usual fastest pace. At this point, as long as the rider controls the direction, they can charge at a much fiercer speed than usual. However, there's a drawback. The horses will tire more quickly than usual, and the number of charges will be reduced. But the Han tribe's cavalrymen each have 3 horses, so I don't think this is a problem. It can be mastered with more practice. Having finished, Bao Yin looked at you, seated in the position of authority, with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation, awaiting your reaction. When you were halfway through speaking, Bao Yin's heart sank, growing colder and colder. He had been hoping to snag a position similar to Yili's, to raise a nomadic cavalry force armed by the Han tribe, and cut an imposing figure. But what was the result? The leader had only given him the post of Kanjun, staff officer in charge of training. He knew full well this was just a drill master with no real power to speak of, but when you then explained your reasoning, Bao Yin's cold heart suddenly warmed up again. The leader said he was to learn the army's management system. Only then did Bao Yin slap his thigh in realization. The leader was right. He was completely clueless about the Han tribe's formal military regulations and complexities. If he were really allowed to raise his own troops now, his potential would likely peak there. The leader would, at best, use him as an enforcer. But, now being sent to learn, the future possibilities were as vast as the sea. Although his current position wasn't high and he had no troops under his command, this arrangement was like being promised a glittering golden future. No, it was the future. Without a second word, Bao Yin nodded in agreement like a chicken pecking at rice. Afterward, Bao Yin wasn't immediately sent back to the grasslands. Instead, you arranged for him to take an in-depth tour of the Han tribe's territories. Of course, access to confidential and critical areas was forbidden. He traveled overland from Weishan Commandery, sauntered to Luoyang Commandery, then headed west from Luoyang Commandery, dashing off to Saitong County, followed by Ruyang Commandery, and finally ambled into Hanyang Commandery. He didn't get a chance to see the counties under Hanyang Commandery's jurisdiction, because he discovered that you, esteemed leader, were already waiting for him in Hanyang Commandery, with your legs casually crossed. Hanyang Commandery, the Han tribe's earliest base of operations. Though not large, it was the leader's Longxing GD, place where one's power originated, and its supporting infrastructure was impressively complete. Inside the city, a construction site was bustling, with activity building a house. It was said to be the leader's new mansion. From the street, Bao Yin caught a distant glimpse of the mansion under construction. Goodness gracious, a full 3 stories high. Apart from a few scattered bricks and stones, the amount of timber used made even him, a man of the grasslands, feel a pang of pity for the leader's expense. These Han tribe people really go all out when they build houses. Bao Yin grumbled to himself. If it were us herdsmen, we'd never waste so much. Good timber, not even if you beat us to death. With this much wood, couldn't you make more carts, carve more bows and arrows? Isn't that much better than building a house? But isn't this precisely the allure of the Han tribe? Another voice countered in his mind. The houses they build can't be moved, but they're comfortable to live in. That's called a home. Herdsmen don't have homes. They spend their whole lives exposed to the wind and rain. But am I still considered a herdsman now? Who knows? Maybe in a little while, I too could have a home like that. Those Han people always say a home is meant to be comfortable after a hard day's work, to return to your own little nest and sprawl out comfortably. That's what they call living. That's why they're willing to spend a lot of money fixing up their homes, digging a well today, putting up a grape trellis tomorrow, adding little knickknacks to the house from time to time, never tiring of it. As he thought about it, Bao Yin suddenly felt a twinge of envy. Life on the grasslands was harsh, never knowing where the next meal would come from, migrating with the water and grass, and any day you could be chased like a rabbit by another tribe. The Han tribe people didn't have to worry about such things. They had homes, land, and a stable livelihood. Even if enemies came knocking, they could just hide behind those high city walls and be perfectly safe. No, perhaps no one even dared to entertain thoughts of attacking the Han tribe, because the Han tribe was simply too strong, absurdly strong. Having journeyed this far just by looking at the layout of the Han tribe cities, Bao Yin had figured it out. No one could dream of overthrowing the Han tribe. Want to besiege one city? Don't even think about it without at least 10,000 men. But if the Han tribe just closed its city gates and held out for a few days, reinforcements from other cities would pour in from all directions, surrounding the enemy like they were wrapping dumplings. So yes, no one could defeat the Han tribe. At least there wasn't a tribe on the grasslands that formidable yet. Bao Yin, you said, looking down at him from the 5th floor of the Hanyang Commandery government building. This time, the army is fully transitioning to cavalry, which requires a large batch of weapons and supplies. You are to return to Kaiyuan city with these supplies. An elder from the Shin tribe will accompany you. Your mission is to ensure that every single item in this shipment reaches the army intact. Can you do it? Yes, I guarantee I'll complete the mission. Please rest assured, leader. Bao Yin was now full of fighting spirit, his heart bright and clear. It was the light of hope, a light you, leader, had ignited. Very good, you said from behind your desk, pointing to a pile of things on a tea table by the window. Take these. They're your waist tally, official seal, official robes, armor, letter of appointment, and a weapon of your own. All rushed for you in the past few days. I heard you like the Han tribe's sabers, so I had one forged for you. Bao Yin's eyes lit up instantly, like 200-watt light bulbs. It wasn't because of the fancy official robes and seals, but because of the suit of armor and the long saber. Those were fine things he had dreamed of owning. Why had he eagerly scurried over to pledge allegiance to the Han tribe in the first place? First, the grasslands were too chaotic. Small tribes, especially those near the territory of that bastard Modin, were either forcibly annexed or plundered empty. To protect his small band of people and horses, Bao Yin had no choice but to cling to the Han tribe's powerful thigh for patronage. Second, He hadn't chosen other large nomadic tribes because the Han tribe's supply of resources was so reliable. Following the Han tribe, one wouldn't have to worry about running out of clothes and food mid-battle, not even down to their last pair of underpants. The Han tribe could produce these things themselves. No one could cut off their supply lines unless the entire Han tribe collapsed, which of course was impossible. Most importantly, Bao Yin himself harbored a little ambition. He figured that Yili wasn't any smarter than him. In terms of family, resources, population, and livestock before joining the Han tribe, how was he, Bao Yin, inferior to Yili? Since Yili could be highly valued by the Han tribe, leading a troop of ironclad cavalry and showing off his might, why couldn't he? So he came to try his luck. What if he succeeded? Bao Yin suppressed the excitement and ecstasy in his heart, managed to perform an awkward bow to you with some clumsy etiquette, and dryly said, "Thank you, leader." Then, like a starving wolf spotting meat, he pounced on the pile of rewards. The silvery white iron armor glinted with a cold, sharp light. In color, it wasn't much different from that of ordinary soldiers. It wasn't the flashy scale armor worn by high-ranking military commanders, nor the lamellar armor of common soldiers, but the mountain pattern armor standard issue for junior officers. However, as a Kanjun, he had to have some special treatment, right? His suit of armor had a round heartguard plate attached to both the front and back. He'd heard that high-ranking military commanders had two in the front and one on the back. Additionally, besides vambraces, his armor also featured two imposing beast head ornaments on the shoulders, something ordinary officers couldn't even dream of, after all. A Kanjun in the Han tribe's regular army was at least a fairly important figure, so it couldn't be too shabby, right? Bao Yin thought with gleeful satisfaction. The battle saber placed beside it didn't look much different from the standard-issue waist-slung saber. Actually, Bao Yin wasn't much of an expert. He could only tell that the scabbard was made of ebony, very hard, and had open-work silver bands. The entire saber was a tiny bit longer than the standard model, and the blade was slightly narrower. It had a slight upward curve, but not like those exaggerated scimitars. Like the standard waist-slung saber, this one also had a tan handguard, the guard between the blade and the hilt. The hilt wasn't long. It was still in the category of a single-handed saber, not the heavy type used for charging into enemy lines, but it was especially suited for light cavalry to slash rapidly during advances, his most cherished style. This saber is better suited for cavalry use on horseback, different from the infantry sabers of those saber and shield soldiers. Bao Yin mused to himself after examining it carefully for a long while. Of course, he didn't say this out loud. How? Could he be picky about something the leader had bestowed upon him? In truth, he was already blooming with joy inside. You accepted another bow from him and then took him to the supply warehouse, detailing the items to be transported this time. You also had him, the professional cavalry Kanjun, inspect the weapons and equipment, and evaluate their performance. After all, whether the equipment was good or not was ultimately for top-tier frontline riders to say, and Bao Yin was precisely such an expert. The warehouse doors swung open. Whoa! Inside, it was packed to the brim with supplies. There were mainly 4 types. First, horse tack, mainly stirrups and saddles. These were standard equipment for forming cavalry. Without them, cavalry would be a joke. Second, iron ingots. These were raw materials for logistics, mainly used for repairing equipment. And shoeing horses. That's right. Cavalrymen might not wear out their shoes much, but the iron horseshoes on a horse's hooves were consumables, needing replacement every so often. At least that was the case for the Han tribe. Third, armor and armor components, things like armor plates and cords, used for repairing damaged armor. What made Bao Yin's eyes widen the most were several thousand sinew hornwood composite recurve short bows. These bows had been made last winter but had been kept in storage, unused, because there was no one to use them. This type of short bow was best suited for cavalry. Infantry could use them too, of course, but the Han tribe's infantry had possessed powerful weapons like the Shenbino, lit, divine arm crossbow. So these bows had just been gathering dust. Now they were finally going to see the light of day. Stored with these bows were mountains of arrows, all stock accumulated over a long time. Bao Yin picked up a standard-issue recurve short bow and examined it meticulously. The feeling, how to describe it, it was like his first blind date with an unfamiliar young woman, a mix of curiosity and slight nervousness. Mounted archery, that was a legacy etched into the very bones of the nomadic peoples. Before they were even born, their fathers had already prepared small bows and arrows for them as toys. Every child on the grasslands grew up riding lambs and playing with little bows. When they grew taller, their mounts changed to fine steeds, and the toys in their hands transformed into weapons capable of easily taking the lives of prey and enemies. If you were to say who understood mounted archery best, it would undoubtedly be the nomadic peoples. This was also an important reason why you chose him to be a kanjun. How is this bow? If used for mounted archery, you asked. I don't know yet, Bao Yin said, holding the bow, a little unsure. It's the first time I've seen a bow like this. However, it looks to be exceptionally well made. Leader, may I string it and try it out? Of course, you nodded. Those in the know understood that bows were always strung only when about to be used. If not used for a long period, it was best to unstring them. This preserved the bow stave's elasticity, ensuring it had enough power when drawn. Never turn your back on the enemy. This phrase sounds like a warrior's motto anywhere, but for cavalry, skilled in mounted archery, hey, there's an exception. Bao Yin's mounted archery stance was textbook perfect. Though his feet were on the ground and there was no horse beneath him, every move was absolutely the most authentic of the grasslands. Nomadic horse archers had a special skill. Because they were on horseback, they excelled at shooting sideways and twisting to shoot backward. Why? The horse's head was in the way in front. When horse archers fought, they usually circled the enemy, loosing arrows into the crowd as they rode. In a chase without stirrups, those being pursued actually had the advantage. This was because every herdsman was adept at the Parthian shot, able to unhesitatingly pepper the pursuers behind them with a few nasty shots. But those chasing were in a tough spot. Without stirrups, they couldn't stand steadily on a galloping horse. They could only lean sideways to shoot from the rear flank, or simply catch up to the enemy's side and ride parallel before getting a chance to return fire. Another point, the engagement distance for mounted archery was generally not far. Both sides usually started loosing arrows only when within 50 meters. Firstly, the bows weren't great, nor were the arrows. Their power was insufficient, so they had to get close. Secondly, the targets were moving at high speed, making aiming difficult to begin with. Firing from too far away required calculating lead, but the enemy wasn't stupid. Seeing you raise your bow, they could change direction and speed. Arrows, loosed, would mostly just tickle the air. A complete waste of effort. What do you think of this batch of bows and arrows? Tell me your thoughts, you asked Bao Yin, who had just put down his bow. Bao Yin mulled it over and said, Leader, this bow is truly excellent. Although I haven't tried it on horseback, it feels good in the hand, the weight is right, and the length is perfect. It's practically tailor-made for us cavalry. The bow stave is also very springy. I reckon it can shoot farther than our herdsmen's bows. However, I do have a small suggestion. These arrows are too heavy. They'll slow down the arrows' speed. If we switch to lighter arrows, I think they might be more effective for mounted archery. After all, in mounted archery, both sides are moving at high speed. The side with faster arrows will have a more obvious advantage. Of course, Bao Yin quickly changed his tune, afraid of displeasing you. What I said might not be right. We're used to hollow bamboo arrows. This is the first time I've handled solid wood arrows, so maybe I'm just not accustomed to them. He attributed the issue to his own habits. As for your final decision, that was your business. He was just offering a suggestion. You pondered for a moment. The bows were definitely not the problem. The issue lay with the arrows. You didn't know much about arrows, but you were very familiar with ranged projectile weapons. There was an ironclad rule in firearms. With the same velocity, the heavier the projectile, the greater the kinetic energy, often summarized as caliber is justice, range is truth. Although bows and arrows weren't firearms as ranged weapons, the principle was similar. Heavy arrows were like large caliber bullets, packing a powerful punch, and in the age of cold weapons they were best for armor penetration. Light arrows, on the other hand, were like small caliber bullets, fast with low drag and strong penetration, but lacking a bit in stopping power. You stuck to your old theory: weapons are neither good nor bad, only suitable or unsuitable. Choosing the right weapon for the target is key. The Han tribe's hypothetical enemies were mainly grassland natives. Even enemies from other tribes were mostly in a naked state without armor, at best wearing a low-spec version of leather armor. Therefore, the Han tribe didn't have high requirements for armor penetration. As long as the arrowheads were metal, piercing leather armor was a piece of cake. Analyzing it this way, equipping the Han tribe with heavy arrows indeed wasn't very useful. Then let's focus on light arrows, you thought. I understand what you're saying. I'll have someone prepare light arrows. Bring these heavy arrows along. 2. Consider them a reserve for city defense. You nodded, agreeing. This made Bao Yin overjoyed. It showed that the leader still valued his opinion. After testing the bows and arrows, the two of you began inspecting other supplies and equipment. A small number of horse lances, a large quantity of new-style cavalry sabers, and charging sabers specifically for heavy cavalry. The lavishness of the Han tribe's equipment once again refreshed Bao Yin's understanding. The thought that he was about to join such a super-rich army and even become a high-ranking officer made him rub his hands in excitement. The supplies were quickly inventoried and began to be loaded onto carts. There was so much that it took an entire day to load. Bao Yin was to set off the next day, accompanied by an envoy sent by the Xin tribe, Niu Wei. Although they were traveling the same route, their itineraries had some differences. The supplies would be transported by a convoy of carts to Luoyang Commandery, where they would be loaded onto ships. Then Bao Yin and Niu Wei would board the ships and travel by water first to Kaiyuan Commandery, on the shores of the grassland lake. That was Bao Yin's final destination, but Niu Wei's stopover. He wanted to see it, and you decided to let him. Niu Wei would stay in Kaiyuan Commandery for a few days to see the Han tribe's new base on the grasslands, and also to experience the Han tribe's influence and strength there. Afterward, he could report these hard facts accurately to their great chieftain. This was a show of force from you to the Xin tribe, and also a declaration of sovereignty. These grasslands from now on belong to the Han, at least on the surface. Even if the Xin tribe wanted to do business on the grasslands in the future, they would have to get the Han tribe's approval. Otherwise, no deal. Niu Wei also understood your meaning. Regarding the relationship between the Han and Xin tribes, and the true strength of the Han tribe, Niu Wei actually had a clearer understanding than their great chieftain. Niu Wei had a better sense of how the two tribes would get along in the future. He would stay in Kaiyuan Commandery for about a week, then travel by sea to Bamboo Island. He had no desire to take that secret bridge he had walked for over a decade. There was nothing new about it, and if he missed the timing, he'd have to wait idly on the shore. With that time, he'd rather experience the sea route and see exactly how the Han tribe reached Bamboo Island directly from the sea. You agreed. This was also a way of flexing your muscles at the Xin tribe, telling them plainly, "We, the Han tribe, have a direct waterway to Bamboo Island. As the developer and controller of this waterway, you can figure out for yourselves how many ships the Han tribe has and how much we can transport at once. Of course, whether it would be troops or technological supplies would depend on how the relationship between the Han and Xin tribes developed in the future. Displaying strength, flexing muscles. Many high-ranking officials understood the purpose of this operation, but they weren't quite sure who it was being shown to. Most people thought the target was the Xin tribe, but in your eyes, the target was perhaps only one person, Niu Wei. Although you hadn't interacted much with Niu Wei, through the Jinwu Guard spies placed around him. You had a thorough grasp of Niu Wei's daily life, eating, drinking, relieving himself, sleeping. Oh no, rather, his every move. Niu Wei was a smart man, capable and courageous. From his series of strategic moves on the grasslands back then, to his daring to lead an envoy mission thousands of miles without the Han tribe's permission, and then his series of actions after arriving in Han tribe territory, Niu Wei was by no means an ordinary person. In your assessment, making Niu Wei a commandery governor would be a waste of his talents. He was even more suited to lead the Xin tribe than their great chieftain. If he were the leader of the Xin tribe, the current Xin tribe would absolutely not be in such a sorry state. They would be stronger and might even pose considerable trouble for the Han tribe. Unfortunately, he wasn't, and Chieftain Xin wouldn't be foolish enough to give up his position to him. So, under these circumstances, what choice would Niu Wei make, knowing the Han tribe's true strength? When he gained a deep understanding of the Han tribe, and then returned to his familiar Xin tribe, what choice would he make after comparing the two? Would he secretly defect to the Han tribe, accelerating the Xin tribe's demise? Or would he stand firmly with the Xin tribe, loyal to their great chieftain, seeking opportunities to rapidly develop during the period of cooperation between the two tribes, and then turn around and bite the Han tribe? To be honest, you didn't know the answer either. But you dared to gamble. You dared to send Niu Wei, who had lived in the Han tribe for over a year, back. You dared to send Niu Wei, who grasped the true situation of the Han tribe, back. This was your attitude towards Niu Wei. You were betting on Niu Wei's ambition. If Niu Wei had no ambition, then he would go with the flow, do nothing, and let things develop according to your projections. But Niu Wei wasn't that kind of person. You trusted your judgment. If Niu Wei had some ambition, then he would defect to the Han tribe, become a mole planted in the Xin tribe, and a crucial piece in your plans. There was no doubt about this, because you knew very well that for Niu Wei, so-called loyalty to the Xin tribe was just a joke. Before him lay two paths. 1. Continue as an elder of the Xin tribe. 2. Defect to the Han tribe and become a high-ranking official. Both involved working for others. Anyone with a bit of sense and ambition knew which path had a better future. Coincidentally, Niu Wei was a man with both brains and ambition. And you had immense confidence in your Han tribe, this powerful, promising, super-potential entity. So you let Niu Wei choose with peace of mind. There was one last possibility. When Niu Wei had brains, ambition, and was also exceptionally bold, then he would use defecting to the Han tribe as a condition to demand more benefits from you. If his ambition extended beyond being a high-ranking official in the Han tribe, then he might very well be expecting to be the Xin tribe's chieftain under your authority. This might sound a bit convoluted, but it was the truth. To become the actual controller of Bamboo Island, a territory under the Han tribe but possessing independent power. This, perhaps, was Niu Wei's greatest ambition. However, if Niu Wei really dared to make such a demand, you would absolutely not agree to it.